All right, we're finishing here the duties of the President of the United States. These last couple of sections here just talk about some of the particular responsibility that the President has. So let's start here. We're at Section 2. The President shall be the Commander-in-Chief. That's a title you've probably heard before. Of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states. What did we say the militia was? If you remember, the militia is now the National Guard. How do you even deal with my handwriting on this? It's so crummy. I can't even believe you learn anything. But the militia is now the National Guard. So the President is in charge of those things. He tells them what to do and when to do it. So when they are called into the actual service of the United States, he is the Commander-in-Chief. So he runs the wars and what our armed forces do. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officers in each of the executive departments. So there are executive departments that can be set up, and you have those. There's the Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, all those type of things that the president has set up to help him. And there's heads of those departments, and they come together, and those people are members of his cabinet, the ones that he requires the opinion of. So upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices, and he shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons. So the president actually can pardon people for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. If they're impeached, the president can't pardon them from that. But pardon, so like if somebody's convicted of a crime, then the president can let them go free. How often does this happen? Actually, it happens quite a bit. Most of the time, it's right when a president is about to leave office. In fact, in the last month or week or so of a president's term, he will issue a bunch of pardons. Some people kind of question that, think it's kind of, maybe not so moral. Sometimes they pardon people that gave them lots of money for their campaigns. But once they're leaving office and don't have any more real reason to be perfect, I guess, they do often hand out lots of pardons at the end of their terms. That's pretty common. So, moving on, he shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. So this is the Senate that does this, to make treaties with 2/3 of the senators present concur. So the president does negotiate treaties. It's not the thing the whole Senate does. The president negotiates treaties, but then the Senate has to approve them. They have to give their advice and consent. They have to agree to it. So the Senate agrees to the treaties, but it's the president that actually negotiates them and works them out. So if the government's making an agreement with another country, the president does it, but then the Senate has to approve it. He shall nominate, and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate again, he shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law. But Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the president alone, in the courts of law or heads of department. So if the president chooses ambassadors, ministers, consuls, judges, and all other officers, he chooses them, but the Senate has to, again, give their advice and consent. The Senate has to approve. So you'll see that when, especially this one is a big one, when they decide to have a new judge on the Supreme Court, the president picks it, but then the Senate has to get together and decide if they approve it, and sometimes it can get a little bit sticky. However, it does say that Congress may say for such inferior offices, so smaller jobs that aren't that big a deal, they can just say, look, you can put whoever you want in, we don't need to approve it. So they do allow Congress to say, these are the jobs that the president can just hire somebody to do it, and we don't need to approve it. But it's the president's job to choose, but the Senate's job to approve it. So that gives some of those checks and balances there, that the president can't do it all by himself, he needs the Senate's approval. The president shall have power to fill up all vacancies that may happen during the recess of a Senate by granting commissions which shall expire at the end of their session. For instance, ambassadors here, if an ambassador dies, well, then the president needs to put a new ambassador in, but he has to have Senate's approval. Well, this is just saying that he can put somebody in without their approval until they come back together again, and then he has to get their approval. So if they're not going to meet for another couple months, he can say, well, this person's going to do the job for the next couple months, but then I need to have the approval of Senate to have somebody stay. And that does happen once in a while. The State of the Union. This is actually, that big speech that takes over all the TV stations every year, usually in January. This is where it is. It's actually part of the Constitution. The President, from time to time, give Congress information of the State of the Union, so how things are going. He has to give a report of how things are going, and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. So he's supposed to say, here's some laws you guys should think about to have. He may, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses or either one of them in case of disagreement between them. With respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such times as he shall think proper, and he shall receive ambassadors, other public ministers. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. That's one of his big jobs, is to execute the laws, and shall commission all other officers of the United States. So he does give a report of how things are going, the State of the Union address. This is how things are going, and here are some laws that I recommend. Those are the big things there. Disqualification. The President, Vice President, and other civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office. On impeachment for, remember, impeachment doesn't mean you're guilty, it means that you're going to be tried. So if they're impeached for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So if they are impeached and convicted for any of these things, they will be removed from office. Again, recently, probably the most recent example of this is we had Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was impeached, but he was not convicted, so he stayed the president. But there you go, are some of the other duties of the president there. He is in charge, commander-in-chief of the armies. He does make treaties with the approval of the Senate, and he does appoint ambassadors and judges and other officers by the approval of the Senate. And he is supposed to give the State of the Union address, where he gives a report on how things are going with his recommendation of new laws they should think about, which the president does every year, and can be removed if he's impeached and convicted. That's the whole Article 2. We're going to move on to Article 3, the judicial branch here.